He mopped the same hallway every night for 41 years. He came in at 10. He left at 6. He ate his dinner in the break room alone, because the break room was quiet and the halls were loud, and he had raised enough loud in his lifetime to last him twice over. He never called in sick. Not once. He worked Thanksgiving. He worked Christmas Eve. He worked the morning after his wife's funeral, because staying home alone with her absence felt worse than the mop. And every week, after taxes, after the union dues, after the small garnishment that had followed him since a bad year in 1987, he brought home $527. At 78 years old, Eugene Thibodeau had no other plan. He did not know that 3 time zones away, someone who had once fallen asleep on his couch had just found out, and had already picked up the phone. This is the story of Eugene Thibodeau, the man who held a family together with a mop handle and a silence that never broke, and the night his most famous neighbor decided that a debt 40 years overdue had come due. The floor was always the same floor. Linoleum, buff-colored, with a faint pattern of brown diamonds that had faded to suggestions by 1990 and were now nearly invisible. The halls of Mercy General Hospital in Newark, New Jersey, ran 1,140 feet from the east entrance to the stairwell by the loading dock. Eugene Thibodeau had measured it once, on a slow night, by counting his steps. He counted 812 steps at his natural pace. He had walked those 812 steps, with the mop, every working night for 41 years. His name tag was laminated. The edges had yellowed. His name was printed in a font the hospital had stopped using in 2003. The new employees sometimes looked at it, and then looked at him, and he would smile and say the tag was old, but so was he. And that usually ended the conversation. He was not unhappy. That was the thing people who knew his story never quite understood. Eugene Thibodeau was not a man bowed under the weight of his circumstances. He was a man who had decided, somewhere around the age of 40, that contentment was not something that arrived from the outside. It was a practice, like mopping. You did it the same way, every night, and the floor was clean, and that was enough. What Eugene Thibodeau was, quietly and without announcement, was tired. Not tired of the work, tired in the way that a body communicates things the mind has agreed not to think about. His left knee had been replaced in 2019. The right one needed replacing now, and had for 18 months. But the recovery time was 6 weeks, and he could not afford 6 weeks without income. His lower back had developed a stiffness that arrived every morning around 4 and did not fully release until he was already an hour into his shift. Moving. The night supervisor, a kind man named Daryl, had noticed the way Eugene walked and had quietly adjusted his route 3 months ago, shorter distances. Less far from the elevator, no heavy equipment. Eugene had accepted this without comment. He understood it for what it was. He had 4 more years until Social Security paid him enough to survive on. 4 years felt like a very long hallway. What Eugene did not know, what Daryl did not know, what the hospital did not know, was that a photograph had been taken 12 days earlier. It was taken by a nursing student named Amara Cole, 22 years old, during her overnight rotation. She had been walking the East Hall at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, and she had seen an old man mopping in a slow, careful rhythm. His back slightly curved, his face entirely at peace. Something about it had moved her in a way she could not fully explain. She took out her phone. She took the picture. She posted it with 5 words. He does this every night. The post got 47 likes in the first hour. By morning it had 12,000. By the time Amara woke up and checked her phone, it had been shared 84,000 times, and someone in the comments had identified the hospital and the man's first name, Eugene, from the faded tag barely visible in the frame. And by noon on that same day, it had reached someone who looked at the face in that photograph and went absolutely still. The name Shaquille O'Neal would have meant nothing to Eugene Thibodeau if you had said it to him in 1984. In 1984, Shaquille O'Neal was 12 years old, and his name was Shaquille, and he lived 4 floors above Eugene in a building on Hawthorne Avenue in Newark that was old enough to have radiators that clanged in winter and new enough to have a single elevator that worked about 60% of the time. Eugene had lived in that building for 7 years. His wife, Celestine, was alive then. Their son, Marcus, was 9. Their daughter, Denise, was 6. The apartment was small, 680 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and it was full in the way that small apartments with children are full. With noise, with motion, with the specific chaos that means a family is whole. Lucille O'Neill was a single mother on the floor above. She had 3 jobs at various points, and sometimes the gaps between them were wider than she let on. When the gaps were wide, and when she needed to be somewhere that was not the apartment, and needed someone to watch Shaquille for a few hours or a whole evening or an entire Saturday, she knocked on Eugene and Celestine's door. Eugene never said no. Not once, in 3 years of living in that building, did he say no. Shaquille O'Neal, at 12 and 13 and 14, fell asleep on Eugene Thibodeau's couch more times than either of them could count. He ate Celestine's cooking. He played cards with Marcus. He watched basketball with Eugene, who had no particular talent for the game, but an excellent feel for when a boy needed someone to sit next to him and not require conversation. Eugene understood boys who had been left. His own father had gone when he was 6. He knew what it looked like when a boy was testing the edges of a space to see whether he would be welcomed or tolerated. Shaquille was testing. Eugene kept passing. He never made a point of it. He never said you can always come here in a way that made it sound like an announcement. He just left the door unlocked and the light on and made sure there was always something in the refrigerator. Celestine used to say, "Eugene, that boy is going to remember you." Eugene used to say, "I'm not doing it to be remembered." When Shaquille's family moved to a different city, his stepfather, Philip Harrison, was in the army and the assignment changed. Eugene and Celestine walked them out to the moving truck. Lucille hugged Celestine for a long time. Shaquille shook Eugene's hand, which surprised Eugene, because Shaquille was 15 and most 15-year-olds did not shake hands. Shaquille said, "Thank you for everything, Mr. Thibodeau." Eugene said, "You're going to be fine, son." He meant it. He was right. The photograph took 6 hours to find its way to someone who recognized the name of the hospital and the building on Hawthorne Avenue. That person was a woman named Keisha Drummond, who had grown up in Newark and now worked at a marketing firm in Los Angeles, and followed several Newark community pages on social media. She did not know Shaquille O'Neal personally, but she had the specific resourcefulness of someone who has spent a career figuring out how to reach people who are difficult to reach. She found an email address for his foundation. She wrote 3 paragraphs. She attached the photograph. She sent it at 11:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. At 6:47 the next morning, someone from the foundation called her back. They asked if she knew the man's last name. She did not. But she knew the hospital. That was enough. Shaquille O'Neal's assistant. A woman named Tanya Briggs, who had worked with him for 9 years, and had learned to distinguish between the things he wanted handled and the things he needed to handle himself, knocked on his office door at 9 a.m. She had the photograph on her tablet. She had the name. She had the address of the building on Hawthorne Avenue. She had a contact at Mercy General Hospital who could confirm whether the man in the photograph was still employed there and on what schedule. She set the tablet on Shaq's desk and waited. He looked at the photograph for a long time. His face did not change the way faces usually change. It did not go soft. It did not crumple. It went somewhere more private than that. Tanya had seen this look before, exactly once, when he had gotten the call about his father's health. It was the look of someone traveling back to a place they had not visited in a long time and finding everything exactly where they left it. "Eugene Thibodeau," he said. Tanya nodded. "He's still there." "He's still there," she confirmed. Overnight shift. 5 nights a week. Shaq was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the window. Then he turned back and said, "I want to know everything. Not just the job. His whole situation." "I'll need a day," Tanya said. "Take 2, he said. "And Tanya, nobody knows about this. Not the team, not the publicist, not anyone. When we move quietly." He did not touch his coffee for the rest of the morning. In the inside pocket of his jacket, He had been carrying a folded sheet of paper since the night before. He had written some things on it at 1 a.m. He was not yet sure what he would do with what was written there. But he had not been able to sleep until he wrote it, so he wrote it, and folded it, and kept it close. What Tanya found in 2 days was the kind of picture that arrives in pieces and becomes harder to look at the more complete it gets. Eugene Thibodeau had worked at Mercy General since 1983. His hourly rate had increased with cost of living adjustments over the decades to $14.20 per hour. At 5 nights a week, 8 hours a night, his gross monthly income was approximately $2,272. After taxes, union dues, and the remnant of a 1987 wage garnishment from a debt that had taken 22 years to resolve, and had actually been resolved in 2009, but had never been properly removed from his payroll record. A clerical error that had gone unnoticed and unchallenged for 15 years. His take-home was $527 per week. His rent was $1,100 per month. His knee prescription was $340 per month. He had no car. He took 2 buses to work. His wife Celestine had died in 2014. His son Marcus lived in Baltimore. His daughter Denise lived in Atlanta. Both called on Sundays. Neither knew their father's full situation. Eugene had arranged it that way carefully, the same way he arranged everything, quietly, without fuss, making sure the people he loved did not have to carry what he could carry himself. The wage garnishment error alone had cost him an estimated $34,000 over 15 years. When Tanya laid all of this out for Shaquille O'Neal, he read it twice. Then he looked up. "The garnishment," he said. "That's a legal error?" "Our attorney says it's reversible," Tanya said, "with documentation." "Get it reversed," Shaq said. "And I want a number. The full amount he's owed from the overpayment. And the other things?" Tanya said carefully. "All of it," he said. "The knee, the rent. Something in the bank that means he can go home. Something that means he doesn't have to decide between the right knee and 6 weeks off." He paused. "And I want to go myself. Not an assistant, not a representative. Me." Tanya wrote it down. "One more thing," he said. "Find Amara Cole, the nursing student who took the photograph. I want to thank her." Eugene Thibodeau came off his shift on a Thursday morning at 6:15 a.m. The East Hall was clean. The floors were dry. He had refilled the soap dispensers on 3 floors and replaced a burned-out ceiling panel light that maintenance had logged 2 weeks ago and not gotten to. He did this because it needed doing, and he was there, not because anyone asked. He was putting his jacket on in the locker room when Daryl, the night supervisor, found him. Daryl said there was someone in the lobby who wanted to speak with him. Eugene assumed it was about the photograph. He had been aware of the photograph for 9 days. Several people had mentioned it. A reporter from a Newark newspaper had called the hospital. Eugene had declined to speak to anyone. He was private by nature and had no interest in being a story. He walked to the lobby in his jacket and his work shoes, prepared to politely decline again. The man standing in the lobby was 7 feet 1 inch tall. Eugene Thibodeau stopped walking. Shaquille O'Neal crossed the lobby in 4 steps and put both arms around the old man and held on. Eugene stood inside that embrace. This enormous, warm, impossible embrace from someone who had last shaken his hand as a 15-year-old boy and felt something leave him. Not painfully, the way a held breath leaves. Slowly, with relief, because it had been held long enough. "You found me," Eugene said into the shoulder of Shaquille O'Neal's jacket. "You never hid," Shaq said. They sat in the hospital lobby for 2 hours. Shaq had arranged for the chairs to be rearranged in a quiet corner near the windows, away from the morning traffic. He had brought coffee from a place down the street, the kind of coffee that does not come from a hospital vending machine. He handed Eugene a cup. Eugene cupped it in both hands and looked at it for a moment before drinking. "Tell me," Shaq said. "Tell me what it's been like." Eugene told him. Not everything. Eugene was constitutionally incapable of telling anyone everything, but enough. He talked about Celestine. He talked about the knee that needed replacing. He talked, with a small and self-deprecating laugh, about the fact that he was 78 years old and still mopping floors, and that he genuinely did not mind the mopping. But he minded the not having a choice about the mopping. 4 more years, Eugene said. Then I can stop. Shaq looked at him steadily. Miss Thibodeau, he said, because some habits from adolescence are hardwired in, I need to tell you some things and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. Eugene tilted his head slightly. This was the posture of a man who suspected he was about to be given something and was already preparing to refuse it. The payroll error, Shaq said. He explained what Tanya had found, the garnishment that had continued 15 years past its resolution, the $34,000 that had been taken from Eugene Thibodeau's paycheck, week by week, in error, for a decade and a half. Eugene said nothing. He had not known. That money is being returned, Shaq said. Our attorney is filing the correction today. The hospital has agreed to cooperate. That is not a gift. That is your money. Eugene looked at the window. The knee, Shaq said. The surgery. The recovery time. That's covered. Whatever you need for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, however long. Covered. That is also not a gift. You spent 30 years keeping that hospital clean, and your body paid part of the price. That's a debt. Eugene's jaw moved. He did not speak. And there's one more thing, Shaq said. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He unfolded the sheet of paper he had been carrying for 4 days and placed it on the seat between them. Eugene looked at it. It was a letter. Handwritten, Shaquille O'Neal's handwriting, large, slightly uneven, entirely sincere. Eugene read it slowly. He read it the way he did everything, carefully, without rushing, with the full attention of a man who had never believed that anything worth doing was worth doing quickly. When he finished, his eyes were wet. He did not wipe them. The letter said, in part, you left the light on when you didn't have to. You kept the door unlocked for a boy who had no claim on your kindness. I don't know what I would have become in those years without your couch, without your quiet, without the way you sat next to me and never asked me to be more than I was. I know who I am partly because of who you were when I was watching. This is not the end of what I owe you. It is the beginning of me finally trying to pay it. Shaq let him read it without speaking. When Eugene looked up, Shaq said, quietly, you told me I was going to be fine. You meant it when nobody else was sure. Eugene said, just as quietly, I was sure. Shaq said, I know. That's the whole thing. That's everything. Amara Cole, the nursing student who had taken the photograph, was finishing her shift when Tanya Briggs found her in the hallway. She was told only that someone wanted to speak with her and that she should come to the lobby. She walked into the lobby and found Shaquille O'Neal standing next to Eugene Thibodeau, and both of them were looking at her with expressions she would spend a long time trying to describe to people later. Shaq shook her hand and thanked her for what she had done. Amara said she had not really done anything. She had just taken a picture. Eugene Thibodeau said, sometimes that is everything. The wage garnishment reversal was processed within 11 days. The recovered amount, after the hospital's accounting department recalculated the full error, came to $38,700. Eugene Thibodeau went on medical leave 3 weeks later for the knee replacement surgery. He was on his feet in 5 weeks. He returned to work in 7. But he did not return to the overnight shift. Daryl, the night supervisor, had been approached by hospital administration with an offer. Eugene Thibodeau, if he wished, could move to a part-time daytime position, 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, with full benefits maintained. The position had been funded through a private donation to the hospital's employee wellness endowment. The donation was anonymous. Eugene accepted. He now works Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday mornings. He takes 1 bus. He is home by noon. He eats lunch at the table where Celestine used to sit, at a window that gets the afternoon light, and he does not rush. Marcus called from Baltimore on the Sunday after the news broke. Because it did break. Eventually, the photograph was too far into the world to pull back, and the story followed, and asked his father why he had never said anything. Eugene said, I said plenty. Marcus, you just weren't listening for that particular thing. Marcus laughed. Then he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm coming up in 2 weeks, Dad." Eugene said, "I know. I'll make sure there's something in the refrigerator." A reporter asked Shaquille O'Neal about Eugene Thibodeau at a press event 6 weeks later. Shaq smiled. He took a breath. "That man never asked me for a single thing," he said. "Not once, the whole time I was a kid in that building. He just made space for me to be there, to be safe, to be fed." He looked at the floor for a moment. When you find out someone like that is still working at 78, still carrying things they shouldn't have to carry alone anymore, you don't make a speech about it. You just make a call. He paused. "He told me something once. When I was 13, and I was trying to figure out who I was going to be. He didn't give me a lecture. He didn't give me advice. He just looked at me and said, 'You're going to be fine, son.'" Shaq looked back up. "I believed him," he said. "I think that's what did it. I think that's the whole thing right there." He didn't say anything else. The room was quiet in a way that rooms rarely are. And in an apartment in Newark, New Jersey, a 78-year-old man with one new knee and afternoon light coming through his window was eating lunch at a table that did not feel empty anymore. He had not watched the press event. He did not own a television. But Denise, calling from Atlanta on Sunday, told him what Shaq had said. Eugene listened. Then he said, "He was always going to be fine. I knew it the minute I met him." Denise said, "I love you, Dad." Eugene said, "I know, baby. The refrigerator's full. Come see me. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If this story moved you, even just a little, hit that like button. It takes 1 second, but it helps more people find stories like this one. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and tap that bell so you never miss another video. But here's the most important thing I'll ask you today. Share this video. Send it to your mom. Send it to someone who needs to hear that the people who left the light on for you, they are worth finding again. Because kindness is free, and sharing it costs nothing. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.